Camera should dynamically move around.
So do we still have Michael?
Michael just popped off. He probably lost signal. But pop right back up.
Right.
I'm gonna join so that I can let people in and stuff from the other room.
Do you hear us, Maxwell? Right. So we're waiting for at least one more member. Michael was online, but disappeared for a moment.
Oh, he's back. I'll co-host so I can do this for me. We'll say another meeting at 6 tonight. Glad we close up this room. Okay. All right. I'll be down in the kitchen if you.
You hearing us, Michael?
I'm on now, yep.
Okay. I guess Bruce isn't gonna come. Maybe he'll come online later. I doubt it, but I guess we'll open the meeting. Let's see. Yeah, we have a quorum of people who were here at the last meeting. Has anybody had a chance to look at the minutes from the last meeting? Any changes? Additions, anything? Do I have a motion to approve the minutes of May 4th, 2026?
I'll make your motion.
Second?
I'll second.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay. Minutes from May 24th are approved. Okay, moving on to tonight's agenda with Seth and Anna.
Those who don't know me, my name's Anna Bouchard. I am a planning intern with Wolcott County Planning Commission. And here's a paper for
Oh,
you.
thank you. I'll never be able to see that.
So basically what I'm going to be talking about today as I get everything all set up. Just showing how to get over there. Sorry. Nope. Yay, okay, success. Okay, so what I'm going to be talking to everyone about today is administrative subdivision approval. Vermont statute title 24, chapter 117 outlines Vermont municipality subdivision review procedures. And basically they say that a Vermont town can make a subdivision application, either a major subdivision, which requires public hearing, municipal panel approvals or denial of the application, and it requires public notice. Or a municipality can allow for minor subdivision approval, where the municipality has to have this established in their bylaws, and it allows for the administrative officer to approve or deny a subdivision application. And so what we have here are, here for now. What we have here are case studies as to different towns in Vermont that allow for administrative subdivision approval. And I'm just gonna be walking through each of these to highlight some of the differences that they do. Just to, yeah, talk through what they've decided to do in terms of, for example, how many lots can be created from a minor subdivision, and also just go into, for example, differences in municipal capacity, for example, how many hours their administrative officer works. Let's see. Okay, so for Killington, their population, just for reference, is 1,415, roughly. That's from 2024. And for them, a minor subdivision is defined as a subdivision resulting in the creation of 5 or fewer lots. And they also have a unique requirement that the subdivision, the parcel that is being subdivided, cannot have been involved in a subdivision in the last 3 years. And the administrative officer reviews the minor subdivision, and within 30 days, they either approve the application, deny the application, or send it to the development review board. And let's see, the administrative officer currently works on a part-time basis, and as of right now, they have not made any approvals or received any applications. But to be fair, they have only allowed minor subdivisions as of April 9th. For Manchester, they have a population of 4,486 roughly. Minor subdivisions are allowed to involve 4 or fewer lots, and they cannot involve planned unit developments or planned residential developments. The zoning administrator is the one who reviews the minor subdivisions, and within 30 days, they have to give a preliminary review to the applicant, so they do not have to have a final decision made. And according to Manchester's zoning administrator, roughly 6 to 8 minor subdivision applications are received per year. They do have, this typically is in the form of small boundary line adjustments or dividing a lot into 2 parcels. And they estimate that this takes about a day or 2 of work by the zoning administrator. Okay, then on to Montpelier. They have roughly a little over 8,000 people living there. And for them, minor subdivisions involve subdividing land into 3 or fewer parcels. Subdivisions cannot be a planned unit development, and let's see. Yeah, they also have, the zoning administrator also must review minor subdivisions within 30 days and approve or deny the application. And so for Montpelier, they actually recently had an administrative cost analysis where they found that the average time that it takes for an administrative subdivision approval to go from initial contact with the applicant to the permit being issued is roughly 3 hours of staff time. And so while the zoning administrator only works 32 hours, or the zoning administrator works 32 hours a week and has the assistance of a full-time planning and zoning assistant, per application, it is combined roughly 3 hours of time that it takes for the application. Okay. So for Morristown, minor subdivisions are any subdivision resulting in no more than 2 new parcels. And this can be in the form of planned unit developments as long as they are designated as a conservation subdivision. And Morristown is unique where they have opted in to have a public hearing with public notice. This is not required in state statute, but they have decided to do that. And within 45 days from the close of the final hearing, the zoning administrator must approve with conditions, or disapprove of the subdivision. And then the last case study is Berkshire with roughly 842 residents. And minor subdivisions are those resulting in 3 or fewer lots. The zoning administrator will review applications, and within 30 days of receiving the application, will either issue a development permit or reject that application. And the development administrator typically works only 1 to 2 hours per week. And according to the Secretary of Berkshire's Planning Commission, there's only been one minor subdivision in recent history. This recent history, we do not know exactly when it has happened, but we do know that the development administrator was not part of this particular subdivision application. And then so here we have a table for comparison. This includes special requirements, for example, that Killington requires that the subdivision that's involved, have not been a part of the subdivision within 3 years, and also notes that Morristown minor subdivision applications still require one public hearing. It also has just population comparisons, maximum number of lots created in a minor subdivision, the number of minor subdivision applications received, a rough estimate, the administrative officer capacity. This is again, some of them rough estimates. For example, with Killington, we know they work part-time. We don't know exactly how many hours this entails. And then can a planned development be included in the minor subdivision? You'll notice that there's some gaps, particularly with Morristown. This is just because we might not have gotten a response from certain applicants or certain towns. People are very busy. With that, are there any questions that I can answer about administrative subdivision approval? I know that I went through that pretty quickly.
I have a general question. And this might be more for Jim or Seth, since I don't remember. Our planned unit development, what's the minimum number of units in order for it to qualify to be put in as a PUD application?
Let me check that next field. I think you eliminated the minimum number in the 2016 amendments, but let me double check that.
So it could be as few as 2.
Yeah, I think the idea was, if I recall, was that if possible to, even a small subdivision of 2 lots, if they could be clustered to protect a floodplain or something, we wanted to allow that flexibility. But let me confirm that.
Sorry, I don't have it in front of me.
It's no, absolutely. Absolutely, all right.
And Seth, while you're looking, Tom's 16 hours a week.
Is that Tom 16?
Yeah, he's 60. Maybe Jim knows or Michael.
I have no idea. Michael would probably know that.
Last time he and I talked about it, he said he was 6 hours a week.
6. Okay.
It's officially, he only does like 1 day of the 3 days he's here as a zoning administrator.
Oh, because
Right,
he's listed also, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't remember ever seeing a minimum.
You do not have any of these. Jim is correct. It's section 5 or 4.50, page 57, and there I don't see a minimum.
So I'm not sure what the value to somebody of creating a PUD on some very, very, like 2 lots or 3 lots. What are they gaining by that? Particularly like 3 lots.
I have only seen one that size in my whole career. And what one that's 2 lot. I've seen a few that are 3 lot, but in that case, there was like a fairly substantial topographical limitation where a 2 lot subdivision with conventional would have been possible, but it would have been very impactful in terms of grading. And the clustering had.
So they allowed smaller lots in the better area.
Yes. And it also enabled them to have like a smaller lots in a better area, and the shared septic and the better soils And again, in that case, that one could have had a mountain, one could have had a conventional, and clustering them made it more economical, and all around. Probably pretty rare though.
I think our PUDs, unless we have a, like professional full-time zoning administrator, PUDs probably ought to all go to the DRB.
And I think with this discussion started at the last meeting. And I apologize, it was like 2 days before my daughter was born, so my memory's messy. I asked, so they have to do this research on some of the case study, because I believe your questions were like, what is the administrative requirements? What are thresholds? This was a good catch that was made on PUDs and whether they're done administratively.
So I'm assuming that if the zoning administrator denies a subdivision, that it would be the same as like denying a building permit, that it could be appealed to the DRB and then the environmental court.
Yeah.
So how much decision making are we planning on doing this evening about this topic?
So for this meeting, you're not making a decision on whether or not to include administrative subdivision in the draft that will be presented to the select board. Really, the decision point is, do you want LCPC to take the next step of developing a draft Wolcott specific for you to review at your next meeting? Ideally, provide a little bit of guidance too on what, like Jim just said, not PUDs, guidance on like what a threshold might make sense of in terms of number of lots, any other considerations you'd like the draft to include. It's really the goal for tonight.
Some sort of guidance, yeah.
Do you think the reason that Killington has such a high minimum is because they have a full-time ZA, and did they also maybe they had an assistant? Because they were at 5.
Well, it's not a high minimum, it's a high maximum.
Sorry, high maximum.
Killington only has a part-time zoning administrative officer. When I talked to I believe the contact that I had mentioned that there was not a lot of developable land in Killington that has not already been developed. And so that may be part of it. They also, it is still a pretty new policy. And so they have not actually had any applications yet. It's only been since April 9th that anyone has been allowed to have any administrative subdivision approval applications. And so they said that they aren't necessarily sure what their capacity would look like if they suddenly got an influx, but they haven't had to worry about that yet just because there's been no applications. Again, likely because of the lack of developable land to be subdivided.
And actually, please, I jumped in probably too soon. If you do have questions about the case studies, feel free to ask Anna. Have Anna hopefully until at least December, hopefully longer. But if you do have questions, she's spoken to staff in most of these communities and done a lot of research. So it would help you. Feel free to ask either tonight or follow-up questions that come to you after the meeting.
What was Morristown's stipulation with the conservation easement, or what was that part they had?
Yeah, so they allow for planned unit developments to be included in their minor subdivision approvals. But it can only be when it's a conservation subdivision specifically. I should look into exactly what the parameters of that are, but in terms of any kind of planned unit development that's specific to bigger development, that's a major subdivision, which would require all of the public hearing and all of that. I should also note that even though Morristown does allow for the planned unit development with the conservation subdivision, they also require all of their minor subdivisions to still have at least one public hearing. And so even if it's a minor subdivision that's just a normal dividing one lot into two, that still requires public hearing, but it's still a minor, or it's still an administrative subdivision approval because it's their administrative officer that is the one doing the approval rather
So-
than a municipal panel.
So does the DRB, do they facilitate the public hearing, or is that just the ZA and the public? Or
I
maybe you
believe
don't know.
I believe it's the ZA. I should double check on it, but I believe it is the ZA that's the one and hosting the hearing.
No, I'll stipulate to that that's unique to Morristown. I haven't seen other examples where the ZA holds the hearing. You know, the ZA staff's hearings, for administrative subdivision or site plan review or zoning permits. So the mechanisms for that, if it's something you want to explore, we need to research more.
To me, the whole point of the administrative review, some of the point is to make it less complicated for people, which to me means no public hearing.
Unless there's an appeal. Then
Right. And then it goes in front of the DRB, and that's where we have our public hearing. Because basically every one of our DRB meetings is a public hearing.
Seth, have you ever seen, instead of a public hearing, a town just opening up a period for public comment where they could submit a letter or an email or something, you know, to be filed or considered when the decision's made by the ZA?
Would that not be like when a like a building permit gets posted, that it's actually publicly posted? If not, like, I mean, we used to have like permit in red letters out on the building or on the roadside. I mean, basically that's the public's chance to comment.
Yeah. Yeah, that would be the typical approach. And then if there are objections, you know, then the process would be for the person to file an appeal, and then that would go to the.
Or for the ZA to turn it over to the DRB, right?
Yeah.
Because you do also have with the administrative review, the ability of the ZA to say, I can't make a determination and turn it over to the DRB without appeal. That's
Right. And depending on the ZA, we may see more or less of that, right?
I would be all right losing the public hearing as long as there was an opportunity for public comment.
Yeah. So that's the stipulation that. Take note of that.
Is it worth asking Tom what his comfort level would be in terms of the amount of lots, whether it's like 2 or 3 or 4, in terms of his capacity, you know, with the amount of time he's in the office?
Yeah, I think you've reached out to Tom.
I've reached out to him. I haven't heard anything back. My questions were mostly focused on the current number of applications that he receives, but that's definitely something I can, in my follow-up to him, include as well.
I don't know that we ought to be writing our rules, which may be on the books for 10 years before we change them specifically for a particular zoning administrator. I mean, if he's not comfortable with the particular, you know, with doing the subdivisions, you could just turn them over to the DRB. But at some point, that's probably going to change.
Oh, yeah, I had the same thought, Jim. I guess my question was more about, you know, regardless of who the ZA is, the amount of time. What did one of the towns, it said it was an average of 3 hours per
Montpelier, they did a, what was it, administrative cost analysis, and they found that the average time per permit for the entire process was 3 hours of staff time.
It is worth mentioning too, from a select board, budgeting standpoint. I agree with Jim. We shouldn't write regulations based on who's sitting in the chair today, but budgeting for the additional time, the additional workload, the additional training, that's something that the select board is going to have to be on board with. Whereas, from a budget standpoint, we get it done for free right now. We're a volunteer of 4 or 5 people. We show up, we do the meetings, we do the approvals. If we're going to have to pay for that, the board may have some input on that.
I'd have to step in on that one though. Yes, we're a board of volunteers, but sometimes it's pretty hard to get a quorum here. Even for the DRB.
Agreed. Nearly impossible most of the time, especially in the summer months. I don't
Right,
disagree
and
with
that's-
that.
And that's a disservice to people wanting to just have their subdivision reviewed. It just seems a whole lot more efficient to have one person. I mean, the rules seem pretty simple, particularly if we're holding these minor subdivisions to essentially the standards we've actually been holding to for people. Like, do you really need on a minor subdivision to like catalog where all the ag soils are and all of that? I believe we've waived most of that for most of these small subdivisions.
So it seems to me the more appropriate thing to do would be to write into our regulations that a small subdivision doesn't require those things so that it breezes through the DRB process, as opposed to, adding to the ZA's plate.
Well,
just food for thought. I mean,
we definitely should do that. Absolutely. Make a differentiation on minor subdivisions versus major subdivisions. But it just seems like a lost opportunity not to also like open it up to administrative review.
So is there a number that we think is reasonable that a ZA could handle for, the amount of lots for a minor administrator review?
Well, depending on what we're holding these minor lots, what standards we're holding them to, are we holding them to just lot size, lot shape, and road frontage, or something beyond that?
well, and again, there too, with a board of 5, if we all vote and agree to waive certain things, then there's no, I don't want to use the word liability, but there's no heavy burden on someone to have to prove that it wasn't selective enforcement or favoritism. It's a board of 5 strangers, I mean, neighbors, but strangers for the most part. Whereas if we have one ZA, who are we to say that, neighbor A doesn't get treated differently than neighbor B just based on the relationship that they have?
Well, that's why you keep
I
your
think
standards
that-
as simple as possible.
Agreed. I think if we're going to do administrative approval, then we really need to focus on what those rules are and make those less restrictive, or less complex anyway, so that they can be as simple as a building permit.
So that's basically what we're thinking.
Do you have a sense, I mean, I think this is good guidance, do you have a sense on that threshold question?
My personal opinion, it should be. I know most don't agree with me. I think it should be 6 lots, the same as it would be as if we had no zoning here whatsoever. The point that Act 250 kicks in.
That might be how Billington picked that time.
It could be. And I know I've heard contrary opinions.
Yeah, I think 6 is a little bit heavy, but again, depending on how the regulations are written and uh, what the criteria is, I could be swayed on that. As they're written right now, the number of boxes to check and the number of things to review, I'm thinking 2 or 3.
Oh, absolutely. If we were to hold it to everything that's in there right now, yes. But again, I'm not sure I've been to a subdivision hearing yet where we've held people to everything that's in that, on that plat review.
Agreed.
Another question I have, when we're talking about minor, I know the number of lots obviously comes up, but also, you could have a 2-lot subdivision that, due to lot shape and size is potentially more complicated than a 5 or 6-lot subdivision that was, laid out in a linear way that's, easy to follow. So I think taking into, I don't know how that would get written into the regulations.
I think a lot of that would have to be our faith, in the ZA to know when to kick it up to us. It's going to be subjective, which is a terrifying thing because how do you write that?
Likely, if there's a need, like if the bylaws say DRB may modify or DRB may waive, you usually don't have a zoning administrator empowered to do that. So if the project requires a modification or waiver, that likely is the trigger that takes it up to the DRB. We can also do the process of looking at your plat requirements and determining if they're all still necessary or if there's some that could be simplified.
Again, it goes on subdivision size, If somebody shows up with a 9-lot subdivision, I probably would be more interested in where those ag soils are and forest, soils are. If somebody shows up with a 3-lot and, they're all gonna be like 3 or 4 acres. It's a different story. So another thing we might want to consider is whether we want to include as minor subdivisions that also include creating a road, which kind of complicates things a little bit.
So everything can access directly onto a town highway
Or an existing private road even, but to create a new road, I mean, that's, we certainly had some discussions about that.
Yeah. That's greater impact and more need for review. Yeah.
Changing the subject slightly, but while we're on the topic of opening up the zoning regs, I would be interested in seeing during the subdivision phase, making sure that there is a way to access the lot that complies with our highway and driveway standards, or at least language that forces them to do their due diligence and make sure. I can't think of one that we've done, but I have asked the question in the past about whether or not you could fit a driveway or you could get a legal access. I would hate to see somebody go through the trouble of subdividing, then ask the town for a driveway permit and have our highway foreman say, yeah, you know what, you don't get the line of sight distance here, so you can't have a driveway. We've essentially created a landlocked parcel in doing that.
I think it's sometimes in the case of, access to lots when we have, one, not a driveway, but even, like a private road that accesses, maybe 2 lots in the back. Don't we usually have one of the conditions that the access to the lots meet the town highway standards?
It's a private road.
I think that Yes, yeah. Generally speaking, yes, but I'm thinking of one that we had done that had a funny lot shape that met its frontage, but the frontage was around a corner. Keeler Pond comes to mind. I'm not sure if that's true or not. But it was around a corner, and one of the questions was, can you get the line of sight required in our highway standards at that location in those 150 feet?
Um, to me, that's all kind of well and good, but is that really, when we're reviewing somebody's subdivision, is it really our responsibility to protect their interests that much? Or is it our responsibility to protect the town interests?
It just puts the town in a, I agree, it shouldn't be our responsibility. They should do their due diligence and they should use their brain when they're doing these things. Unfortunately, sometimes that doesn't happen, and it puts the town in a difficult position trying to grant a variance or something to allow access to these lots because somebody has subdivided and then sold the lot. Now we've got a new homeowner looking for a building permit and access, and we as the select board or whomever have to say, sorry about your luck, pal, but you bought a 3 acre chunk of nothing because you can't do anything with it.
Yeah, so are our standards for like line of sight and other access standards, are those written down?
To my knowledge, yes, they're in the highway standards.
Okay.
And all I'm asking is if the board would be interested in having the zoning regs point to those as a, I don't even care if it's a regulation so much as an advisory, but just making sure that the subdividers are aware that there are those regulations on the books and that they should try and comply with those.
Yeah, I see no harm in that.
Something that I've
Yeah,
seen,
agreed.
something that I've seen before to prevent that situation where a lot is subdivided and sold to a new person is that the 1111 access permit be issued before the Mylar for the subdivision is recorded. So that that's one way to ensure that that way the lot can't be transferred legally until there is a legal access, but it doesn't hold up the approval of the subdivision because you have something like 45 days to do between DRB approval and recording of Mylar. And you can also extend the applicant can ask for an extension pending other permits. So that might be a way to balance that concern. Because you can create it not of permitting, right? You need to get all of your permits before you can get your subdivision, and then right, people might want to know they can subdivide the lot for other reasons before doing the engineering for an access permit. That's a way to balance that. Is that
Yeah, then, that makes sense. Because again, even if it goes to the DRB, we're sitting there and we're seeing a flat piece of paper in front of us. So I don't know what the topographical of that is, where the trees are, the shrubs are.
yeah.
I don't know if we're creating lots where there's any driveway access to them.
Right.
But I've never really considered that.
It's really that you need the road foreman to look at that.
Yes, yeah.
We can look at that too. So threshold wise, and we don't have to determine tonight, we can give you a draft that has multiple ones and you get to pick, but I've heard 2, I've heard 3, I've heard 6. I think
I'm
they're
kind of in
all-
the 2, 3 camp, but that's just based on, current language.
So, when I say 6, I would be fine with that. Certainly, if we wanted to put this in, as an administrative review, as almost like a trial thing, to do it with lower numbers, like three lots would be fine too.
I think we can also on the work to develop a draft community review at the next meeting that uses 3 as a threshold. We could also look at the plat requirements for the, like, those mid-size 3 to 6s and see if there are room for simplified but retaining the DRB process. Because it sounds like, if I'm hearing from all of you, the DRBs and applicants have been caught up on some of those. They haven't seen the right size.
Yes, so people will come in and we'll be asking them to delineate ag soils and whatnot, and there'll be a fair amount of pushback on that.
Okay.
And even once they delineate it all, I don't know if it's ever made any difference on what we did for a subdivision approval. It was just another thing on lot.
Okay.
Yeah, it becomes needlessly complicated and cost prohibitive. I mean, every phone call to an engineer is like lighting $100 on fire. You know, if we can limit that.
Yep. Are there key items? I mean, I've heard about ag soils a couple of times. Are there other key ones or?
So, some of our plot review is showing the water and septic.
Yeah.
I've kind of pushed back on that some too, because there's nothing to stop people from coming and getting a water and septic plans on existing lots anywhere that they want them.
Mm-hmm.
Like I say, most of these things I think they were designed around the bigger subdivisions. Perhaps because we were having a lot of them at some point.
Yeah.
Like before I even got on a planning commission.
I think the first draft of the draft of the subdivision where the checklist is from was like 2005, which
So it predates me some couple of years.
there was a lot of pressure, maybe not in Wolcott, but in.
Well, there was quite a few 9-lot subdivisions.
So it's calibrated for the bigger.
Yeah.
We can spend some time looking at the checklist based on that. If for general feedback, you don't want to put words in your mouths, but when we look at those, for the smaller subdivisions, should we be looking at an item? Is this something that requires an engineer? And if it does, we flag it for further discussion of if you actually need it, or is that a good starting point?
And does it make sense?
Does it? Yeah, does it actually, is it needed for the DRB to do its job of reviewing it as a safe subdivision that complies with the bylaws? Right. Yeah.
Right. Fire ponds. We've always asked everybody, you can have a fire pond, and we usually get like a blank stare because they're creating a 2 or 3 lot subdivision.
Mm-hmm.
We've never held them to that.
Yeah.
Pedestrian and bicycle infrastructure.
Right. Public land. Somebody's carving out a lot for their kid. What public land?
It doesn't make sense. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I think Montpelier had a good checklist of sort of bigger subdivisions and smaller. I recall in the bylaws. We can take a
I
look.
think so.
Yeah.
I'll be honest, I mix up them in terms of like the specific requirements.
The way it was structured, the one that I have in mind is, so this is the requirements for all the subdivisions, and then these are the additional ones for the big ones.
Yeah. It just seems like, that our plat review standards are like out of the Act 250 book, really.
Yeah. Okay, we can work from that too.
Just one more question, and again, kind of off topic, but with the larger subdivisions, the non-administrative review, is the board interested in having any language that points towards the applicant showing, proving, otherwise authenticating compliance with things like the new stormwater rules, and wastewater only applies if it's a residential subdivision, and honestly that should be caught in the building permit process. you know, I don't sound much like myself when I agree with Jim here and say that wastewater doesn't really need to be shown on our maps. It's recorded at a state level. But I'm not certain that every single building permit has gone through with uh, proof of a compliant wastewater. Shortening the question, would the board be interested in having a mechanism that makes it so that the applicant has to show us compliance with state regulations?
Like you're talking about a certificate of occupancy there, Michael.
I'm trying very hard not to go down that road. I really don't want to. I was thinking more about the half acre wastewater, stormwater rules. You know, you've got somebody that tears up a half an acre or more, turns it into impervious surface. You know, somewhere there's a liability ball there about what that's doing to our stormwater runoffs. We're upsizing culverts, we're losing ditches, et cetera, et cetera. And the applicants or the people doing the work don't even know that the state changed the rule. And again, not our job to police that. We're not the nannies of the town, but when they're
So-
coming in for a subdivision and they want to pave 3 acres of parking lot,
So that should be part of the building permit application.
people don't have to come in to clear, you know, if you're going to subdivide and you're going to clear a lot for a better view or for anything, people don't have to come in to cut their own trees.
No, but any excavation is considered to be development, and you're supposed to get a building permit, I believe.
I think so, threshold, yeah.
And anything that's going to change the water drainage.
So
There's
if
no
you come in for a
enforcement.
subdivision, say you have, I don't know, 30 acres and you're doing 3 10-acre lots, and maybe one of them already has a house and you're not doing anything with the other two, versus you're applying for a building permit in terms of impervious surface, what would be the benefit of the state permits for 2 potentially unused lots, undisturbed also?
It's not so much about the benefit or the requirement of having them have a permit, because again, if they're not going to disturb the land, they don't need a permit. Um, the question is more about, you know, there's a lot of feedback that people still believe that Wolcott doesn't have zoning bylaws, and they believe that building permits are rubber stamped, and the state does a horrible job of outreach and letting people know what's going on and what the changes are. And you know, I don't want to say it's a responsibility or a duty, but I do feel a certain way about making sure that the people that are applying to do these things are doing so in a way that is compliant not only with us, but with the state. You know, I don't want to see somebody who invest the time, the money, and then get shut down on a state level permit, or have the state come in and say, you know, how did the DRB or the ZA allow this when it clearly doesn't comply with our regulations? I was talking to, and I've told this story 100 times, talking to a woman who works at the state in the wastewater area when they were doing those septic installer classes. And she told a story about the state coming down on the town of Killington for allowing development in a place that didn't have a compliant wastewater permit.
So one mechanism you can use, you know, there's different steps in the process, and it can make sense to tie different other permits to those different steps. So the issuance of a zoning permit, for example, could be one of those things that before a zoning permit is issued for any lot, the applicant needs to present the ZA with a state septic permit. You will know as part of this, you know, and then other permits like stormwater, if there's more than a half acre impervious. That does still mean someone could create a lot that then, you know, maybe they drew the line so they only have enough capacity for 1 bedroom, not the 3 bedroom house they plan to build. And that kind of turns into the buyer beware, but it protects the town from, say, issuing a permit for a house that then the state says you can't build because of septic. So, you know, I think we can also provide guidance of where to make those different thresholds make sense. And I think I heard, and I think I saw three of you nod, that now was not the time to talk about certificates of occupancy. So I won't do it unless I misunderstood what, because some of these items, that's the check larger towns use. But absent that, there's other ways of doing the checks. They're just a little more clunky. And clunky's okay. Yeah.
I mean, again, from a select board standpoint, we're having trouble enforcing some of the regs that are on our book at this point anyway. I mean, chasing down people violating the junk ordinance is so cost prohibitive that we really are left with no choice not to. In my opinion, means that we should probably repeal that regulation. I have a very similar feeling here. If we can't enforce it, then we shouldn't have it written down. It shouldn't be on anybody to try and say no to a homeowner or to an applicant that we can't stop them. We haven't stopped them. That looks like unequal enforcement. Only the people listening don't get to play ball. So I am all for limiting the barriers, making it easier, but I just want to make sure that everybody has the knowledge to try and do things the right way, and it doesn't come back on us as allowing things that shouldn't be allowed.
Well, our subdivision regulations do state that we allow the subdivision of land for any purpose. It's not just for building.
You just
Be for camping, recreation.
You can also, if the lots are subdivided and don't have, the septic permits, you can also have, notice something at the DRB approval noting that this is being approved, without the septic, and they'll need that to build, so that there is if they choose to build something different, right?
Well, the deed is going to state that anyway.
Yep.
Yeah, I do think that's how we've done that, is that, on the plat, it just says no wastewater.
Yeah. A simple note. Someone who does a title search, that should be flagged.
Well, like I said, since they changed the rules in 2007 or whatever, any deed that doesn't have a wastewater permit states right on it that it's subject to needing a wastewater and wastewater permit.
And I think that I understand the concern about not requiring that time of recording or time of application is because you have people in Wolcott who create laws for other reasons and want to allow that, like forestry or agriculture or camp or any number of things. And you don't want to make it so the only thing someone can subdivide for is development.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, agreed.
Okay. That's helpful feedback. I think we've got some good feedback, and that is, I think, what we have for you for tonight. We'll go back to the draft. If there are any follow-up questions while we're here, I can answer. I think we're at a closing point.
Okay. Any other questions for Seth or Anna? Okay, well, all in favor of closing the meeting, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, meeting's adjourned.
Have a good night, folks.
I didn't need to capture the whole meeting. I just thought we were closing on our part. So if you have any business, we do not. Okay. It was getting the sense that people were